I'm Ravi Bista. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some of the fundamental strategies that you have to apply when you're dealing with the specific type of question, match headings or locating information in your Ielts reading. There are a few things that you have to understand before you deal with this type of question. Well, the essence of this type of question is that the writer may present his view directly or indirectly. Now, when he presents directly, that's pretty much easy because you get a direct clue. For instance, the writer might start a paragraph with computer, and then he further might talk about types of computer like mainframe, super, ultra. So you already get a clue that this particular paragraph is about types of computer. So there's a direct clue. And now the tougher one is the second one, that's indirectly presented ideas. So this is something that you have to infer. So you don't get a direct clues, but you get an indirect clue. So when I say infer, it means you have to be able to deduce information. You have to squeeze some of the lines to extract the main idea. For example, the writer might start, of course, the first paragraph, the first few lines with a computer, and then in the midsection, he might talk about children. And at the end, he might talk about, let's say, how computers are negatively affecting children. So a message could be like computers are detrimental for children. So this could be an indirect version of what he's trying to portray through the paragraph. Okay, having knowing this, now let's move on with the strategy. Okay, here we go. Now, strategy A is when you read a paragraph, put this into your mind. Think always like categorizing or fragmenting the lines as x1, x2, or x3. Sometimes a paragraph could have just two whole unit of idea, or it could be three whole unit of ideas. For example, it says divide the paragraph into different sections, that's x1, x2, x3, and gather details of each fragmented part. Find out which part of the section matches with the idea presented in the list of headings provided, or paragraph that contains such information, we call it as locating information. Now, for example, if you're using this, suppose if this is a paragraph, so what this strategy is trying to tell you is maybe you could, this is x1, this is x2, and this is x3. So it's trying to say categorize this way. Now let's apply this strategy. Now see, also when you read the passage, find the title. The title should be, should be able to give you a good idea about what the passage is about. Now let's see this first. A few years ago, in one of the most fascinating and disturbing experiments in behavioral psychology, Stanley Milgram of Yale University tested 40 subjects from all walks of life for their willingness to obey instructions given by a leader in a section in which the subjects might feel a personal distaste for the actions they were called upon to perform. Oh, that's a big line. Now let's take this as X, or say as x1. Now, specifically, Milgram told each volunteer teacher subject that the experiment was in the noble cause of education and was designed to test whether or not punishing people for their mistakes would have a positive effect on the people's ability to learn. Now, let's take this as x2. Fine. Now, if you read this, now let's see what is this trying to tell you. Okay, let us move on to the next session. Now, if you have gone through the passage earlier, once again I would like to rewind the passage. Now let's see once again, I would like to rewind the passage. So if you see here, what do you see? It begins with one of the most, it's actually the experiment conducted by Milgram in Yale University. That's one part of the information. And the other information is the explanation that Milgram told the teacher subjects about the purpose of the experiment. Okay, again, let's go to the next one. So if it says X1, it says X1 is a study conducted in Yale University in behavioral psychology. So what are the details? Or what's the detail? So under this X1, the detail is tested 40 subjects who are expected to feel a personal distance of the action. And X2 says explanation provided by Milgram to teacher subject. And what are the details? Noble cause of education, whether punishing would have positive effect on the people's ability to learn. Now, if you want to extract the mean idea, so let's squeeze X1 and X2 and you will find out. That means X1 says experiment, right? And X2 gives us the purpose of the experiment. So what's this paragraph about? Would punishment have positive effect on the learner's ability? So when you're looking into the list of statements, what you have to understand is you have to be able to find what is the purpose of the experiment. Okay, now let's go to the earlier passage ones to find an answer. Okay, now see here, it says here, so you have to be able to say, let's see which this information matches this paragraph. It says, the first one says a biological explanation of the teacher subject's behavior. Now there's nothing related to a biological explanation. If this paragraph was to be a biological explanation, it had to talk about biology, like maybe genes, cells, something like that. So this cannot be an answer to this paragraph. Now number 2 says the explanation Milgram gave the teacher subjects for the experiment. Now if you see the explanation Milgram gave, now if you come to X2 version of this paragraph, it says specifically Milgram told each volunteer teacher subject that the experiment was in the noble cause of education. So this is the explanation. So now we already know what is the explanation is to find out if punishing people would have positive effect on their ability to learn. So of course, as of now, because there are still 3, 4, 5, 6 choices, as of now, this is, let's write down A as of now. So because this particular matches this paragraph. The identity of the people's, no, it doesn't talk about any identity, so it cannot be an answer. The expected statistical outcome, and there's nothing about stat, so this cannot be an answer. The general aim of sociobiological, of course, we don't have this term at all, so this cannot be an answer. The way Milgram persuaded the teacher subject to continue. Now, there's nothing about persuading. Persuading is the ability to convince something. And we don't have any convincing thing. It's just that he's carrying out experiment in Yale University, and that has a purpose. So he's giving explanation to the teacher subject that it's in the noble cause of education. So it was designed in such a way that it would help, whether it would help children to learn, or does it have any positive effect when they are punished. So therefore, the answer to number A is 2. Okay, the next one. Okay, now strategy B. See, I would say this is very essential strategy. So read the first line of the paragraph carefully. Now, why do we need to go through the first line very carefully? Because the map of the whole paragraph is the first line, usually, not all the time. Why not all the time? Because the writer may, let's say, figure 1. Now, this is the topic sentence, and these are details. So this means the writer may present his idea here, and then he might give details to support this idea. Now, this is not always the case. Now, what does figure 2 say? Sometimes it is just inverted pyramid. So this means he starts with details and then he gives a conclusion. Means this is topic sentence or main idea. Now again, there's another figure 2. Sometimes the writer may not use both the figures. So he might use this kind of figure, figure 3. So this is the main idea. Main idea. Okay, idea. These are details and these are details. So the gravity is here. So you have to be able to understand. So that's why just reading first line or middle line or last line will not help you. You have to really understand the message very carefully. Of course, again, reading first line is always mandatory. Carefully. Why? Because it gives the central idea or clue of what the paragraph is about. So if the line is broad in nature, I mean if the first line is broad in nature, you should probably expect the following lines or sentences support the same idea. So it's going to give you details to support that particular idea. Another is a paragraph can begin with details as well. You never know, it could begin. So you might then want to stress on the midsection or the last lines of the paragraph. So now it's figure 1, figure 2 and figure 3. So you have to be able to know this. And that's why when you just read first, sometimes when you read first line, you don't get a head or tail out what the paragraph is about. So read further carefully. Now check this out. And let's try to find out where does this follow. Figure 1, figure 2 or figure 3. The growing popularity of the internet seems to unknowingly deter the health of millions of population. Now, here, the preceding lines and sentences will support how the internet has been affecting people. So you could expect explanation this way. Maybe in the following, after this particular line, because this is broad in nature, see, you already get a clue that internet deters the health of the population, people. So it's going to affect people. So particularly what you can expect in the further line, how it affects. Maybe the writer might start with like this. How internet and social media invade private lives. So this is another way affecting population. So you might give a little bit explanation about how these are killing the lives of people. And the writer also may at the same time talk about cheap and deep fakes. Like alteration or manipulation or AV, using software to a Photoshop, software like Photoshop to change image, that cheap fake. A deep fake is like maybe you're using a person's identity complete. Like I'm giving a big speech and you're putting someone else's picture and he's delivering this speech. So that's a deep fake. So maybe you might explain this way. So guys, the first few lines gives you a very good clue of what the whole paragraph is about. All right, now let's apply this strategy. And of course, this falls under which figure? It falls under the first one. Okay, here, let's read the paragraph slowly. Milgram's experimental setup involved placing the teacher's subject before a panel of 30 switches with labels ranging from 15 volts of electricity, which is a slight shock, to 450 volts, that's like dangerous, severe shock, in steps of 15 volts each. The teacher's subject was told that whenever the people gave the wrong answer to a question, a shock was to be administered beginning at the lowest level and increasing in severity with each successive wrong answer. The supposed pupil was in reality an actor hired by Milgram. Why were they hired? To simulate receiving the shocks by emitting a spectrum of groans, screams, and writhings, together with an assortment of statements and expletives denouncing both the experiment and the experimenter. Milgram told the teacher's subject to ignore the reactions of the people and to administer whatever level of shock was called for as per the rule governing the experimental situation of the moment. Now let us first analyze this. Okay, let's see its analysis. Here we go. The first few lines says, it talks about setup for the experiment. And after that, it tells you, increase the severity of punishment for every time the candidates give wrong answers. So that means the level of shock should increase every time they give incorrect answer. So that is what the first few lines convey. What does the midsection say? The supposed peoples were actors in reality. So this is what the midsection covers up. And what does the last line cover up? Now, of course, there's a little bit of detail here, about the actors. Teacher, subject instructed to ignore the reaction of the pupils. Continue the level of shock as per the rule. Now, if you brainstorm the paragraph this way, now, when you first begin at home, when you're practicing, do this way. And later on, you get a habit of, you get this habit of, virtually brainstorming, and it's easy to understand. Now, you can't do that at the moment, or instance, or, in a day. It takes a little bit of time. By the time you appear for the test, you will have developed this skill in the brain. It's easy, and you know where exactly to focus. Now, the clue is, if you have no idea about what this paragraph is about, the first thing is, when you've divided this, when you brainstorm, it says, find out which part of the section does the statement match. If it matches with this, or this, you know that it deals with this specific paragraph. So this is how you're going to break the lines in the paragraph to understand the paragraph. Now let's move earlier passage. So now, what is the answer? Does it talk about anything about biological explanation? It does not anywhere talk about. It talks about setup, and it tells us who those people were, those subjects were actually real actors. And at the end it says, even they scream or rev or they groan, and the actors, even if they have that kind of grievances or whatever, the negative statements, Milgram tells, hey man, you gotta continue. Just ignore them. Now let's see where it falls. So it's nothing about biological explanation, so this cannot be an answer. The explanation Milgram gave the teacher subjects for the experiment, it's not an explanation. We don't know the purpose. And this paragraph B does not contain the purpose of the paragraph. So it's not the answer. The identity of the peoples, let's keep this at the moment. Now, why do we need to keep this at the moment? The identity. So the identity of the peoples, who are these people in real? It says the supposed people in reality an actor. So this is the subject's identity is known. So let's keep this. Sometimes a paragraph could have two statements. When you're giving like and B, you may use any letter more than once. So in that condition, you could use, two statements for the same paragraph. If not, you can't. The expected there's this number, right? The set of numbers, but it says expected. So before the experiment has been conducted, it's the prediction. There is nothing about prediction. So this cannot be an answer. So it doesn't talk about sociobiological study. The way Milgram persuaded the teachers to continue. Now let's keep this as well, because it says to ignore the reaction of the people and to administer whatever level of shock was called as per the rules. Okay, let's keep this as a moment. Now we definitely know that it's the identity of the peoples. Now this looks like it's an answer. Now let's go a little further. The way Milgram persuaded. Now let's see, does he persuade here? It does not any way say that persuade is something that I'm reluctant to do something. So I don't want to do something, or I'm hesitant. And it's like, no, you gotta continue anyhow, man. So persuasive is something convincing, making a stronger argument. Here it's just the instruction. So this cannot be an answer either. So the answer to this paragraph is number 3. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, now what I want you to do is, this is for you all. I want you to go through this paragraph carefully and use the same strategy. A and B is more of synonyms. Read this, and I would want you to comment on the comment box of what the answer is, and then we can provide you what the answer is. All right, now this is your task. Now we'll move a little further. Okay, let's see. And you already get an idea that this is about disappearing delta. Let's understand this. The fertile land of the Nile Delta is being eroded along Egypt's Mediterranean coast at an astounding rate, in some part estimated at 100 meters per year. Now, this particular line should give you a good idea about what it is about. It says, it talks about fertile land. This is being eroded. So the simple idea of this line is that the fertile land is being eroded away. And it says, in the past, land scored away. Land scored away is as being eroded. So now you get a clue. The land taken away, this also gives you a clue about the land being moved away. From the coastline by the currents of the Mediterranean Sea, used to be replaced by sediment brought down to the delta by the river Nile. I mean, this is Nile. It's a typo. But this is no longer happening. Now, you already know that is the land that's being eroded. Now, let's find out. It does not talk about irrigation. So, this cannot be an answer. If this was the answer, of course, the paragraph should have talked about irrigation. Now, just talking about irrigation does not mean the answer is irrigation. It has to talk about effects. Now, for the paragraph to be true to effects of irrigation and sedimentation, the paragraph should also give some of the effects. Just stating impacts would not assume that this answer is correct. So, effects means it has to show what are some of the effects. The danger of flooding, I mean, it doesn't talk about danger of flooding. So, this cannot be an answer. So, it does not talk about pollution. Interrupting a natural process, it no way talks about interruption. It just talks about the land is being eroded. So, this cannot be an answer. It does not talk about food production or trade. This cannot be an answer. Less valuable sediment than before. So this cannot be an answer. So Egypt's disappearing coastline. Let's keep this. It says disappearing coastline. The fertile land is being eroded. Land scored away. So let's keep this. Looking at the long term, it does not anyway talk about long impact. Therefore, the answer to number 7A, this is like A. So this is the answer. So this is like the first line give you a clue about what the paragraph is about. Okay, now this is something that I want you all to understand because this is inference. This is something indirectly presented. Like the earlier one, it was a direct presentation, so you could already get a clue of what the paragraph is about. Now, when the writer does that cleverly, giving you less clue, you have to be able to, x1 and x2. So inference means you might have to squeeze this to get the product. Product means your purpose. Okay, now let's read this carefully. Whenever you read, understand how the paragraph begins, because that's a very good clue to what the paragraph is about. Up to now, people have blamed this loss of delta land on the two large dams at Aswan in the south of Egypt, which hold back virtually all of the sediment that used to flow down the river. Now, what does this mean? So let's talk about, this is X. So it just talks about people blaming. So what are they blaming? Loss of delta land. So it's people are blaming that this Aswan dam for the loss of delta land. So this is culprit. Let's say that's X. Before the dams were built, not except earlier, okay, before the dam was built. Before the dams were built, the Nile flowed freely, carrying huge quantities of sediment north from Africa's interior to be deposited on the Nile Delta. This continued for 7,000 years, eventually covering a region of over 22,000 square kilometers with layers of fertile soil, silt. Annual flooding brought in new nutrient-rich soil to the delta region, replacing what had been washed away by the sea and dispensing with the need for fertilizers in Egypt's richest food-growing area. Now let's take this as X1. So what is this X1 about? This X1 is a state before the dam was constructed. Now what was the situation before the dam was constructed? All those things. I mean, yes, the Nile Delta, took away the sediments, the fertile, nutrients-rich, but the point was it would replenish, it says, even if the flooding took away, even if the flooding actually, it says that annual flooding brought in new nutrients. It says the flood would do a good thing here. Whatever has been washed away, it would replenish with all this kind of let's say nutrients or fertilizers. So this is X1 before the dam was built. So it's something positive. But means, of course, this is contradictory word. So but when the Aswan dams were constructed in the 20th century to provide electricity means, so this is, let's say, X2. So here it says the purpose of building Aswan dams. So what's the purpose? It says to provide electricity and irrigation and to provide electricity, irrigation, and to protect the huge population, center of Cairo and its surrounding areas from annual flooding. So that means the purpose of a dam was to provide electricity, irrigation, protect huge population, okay, and to prevent from flooding and drought. Most of the sediment with its natural fertilizer accumulated up above the dam in the southern upstream half of Lake Nasser instead of passing down to the delta. Now this is quite interesting. Let's say, so X is, let's say this is X1 situation, this is X2 situation. Now this is X1 is before the dam was built. What happened was the natural process was continuing, soils were replenished, even the flooding took away this, it would again replace the nutrient-rich soil. But what happened was when the dam was built, this flowing thing was stopped by a dam. So that means the paragraph is trying to say what was being carried out naturally has been stopped by the dam. Now let's check this out. It does not talk about effects of irrigation. This cannot be an answer. Now the danger, it does talk about flooding, but the writer has used the term flooding here to say that the dam was built in order to protect people from the flood. So it does not talk about the danger. So this cannot be an answer. It does not talk about pollution. Now let's keep this. Why? Interrupting a natural process. Now it no way talks about all those things. It's not directly given, but we can infer that means when the dam was built, whatever things, the flood carried away or whatever this carried away, it was stopped by dam. So that means something natural process was halted. So you could say interrupting a natural process. So this is what I mean by inference. I hope you found this video useful. For more videos, write to us in the comment section. We'll try to make another video for you all on your plays. Until then, bye-bye.